Hello, everybody. Welcome to Split Screen. My name is Kyle Clark.
And I'm Angelica Clark.
And this is a podcast where we do complete breakdowns on movies, TV shows, books, etc. when it comes to mental health or overall spooky quality of it.
And I am a licensed therapist, and I will essentially be diagnosing the main characters, antagonist, protagonist, what have you, and we just do this for fun anyway, so why not make it into a podcast? And here we go.
What better way to start something like this than to start from the beginning? And so today, we will be discussing Psycho. So before we get into the nitty and gritty, we did read the book with our ears, and we did watch the original 1960 film Psycho. But for those of you who have no clue what we're talking about, so Psycho is a novel that was written by Robert Bloch. It's about a character by the name of Mary Crane, a secretary who steals money and checks into an isolated motel, the Bates Motel. The owner of the Bates Motel is a gentleman by the name of Norman Bates, who is our main character of this book. The plot unfolds to reveal that Norman has split personality. One is his own, while the other personality is of his dead mother. Man, I couldn't imagine having that being my second personality, if we're being honest.
Well, it's not like you would know.
I guess that is true, but that's what we're going to get into today. I don't necessarily want to go any further into the book in case nobody has read it, and I want to give everybody the option to go read that incredible piece of literature. Now, so Psycho is, some people say loosely based, but upon doing that research and getting a chance to finally get into the book and watching the movie, it is very based off of a serial killer from back in the day by the name of Ed Gein.
Mm.
And so you're going to hear us talk about Ed Gein a little bit. You can't really talk about Psycho without talking about Ed Gein.
No. I mean, essentially, Norman Bates is Ed Gein of Psycho. So
Yeah, and so if anybody who is listening to this doesn't know who Ed Gein is, which most of us should know by now, Ed Gein was a prolific serial killer back in the 1950s, and he actually only killed 2 people, but
that were confirmed.
There were 2 speculated that were never confirmed, because 4 people went missing around the same time that these 2 women that Ed Gein had disposed of. Ed's main hobby was digging up graves and turning people into lampshades and belts and vests and whatever he could think about.
It was a hobby of his, if you want to call it that.
Yes, and that's what he called it. And whenever he was arrested, and he was confused as to why am I being arrested for this hobby, but he didn't necessarily have a whole lot of recollection of actually killing 2 people as well. And the reason why these 2 characters are so alike is, one, obviously, Norman Bates is based off of Ed Gein, but you can't know who Norman Bates is without knowing who Ed Gein is.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't a podcast on Ed Gein. This is a podcast on Psycho. So Ed Gein's going to make appearances during our conversation, but he is not the main talk about this. The main talk is Norman. If you haven't seen the Netflix series on Ed Gein, you should go check it out.
Well, Charlie Hunnam. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Pacific Rim. Come on now. Sons of Anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Man, could turn me. It's an incredible story, and it was the trademark of what we know as slasher serial killer movies today. It lined the pavement for us to follow through.
So when we talk about Ed Gein and we talk about Norman, what would you think, like, what are their biggest similarities?
The biggest similarity right off the bat for me is the relationship Norman has with his mother and the relationship Ed had with his.
Which, interestingly enough, Norman Bates' mother was Norma Bates. Very, very clever, right? Naming her son after herself. And then there was Ed Gein's mother, Augusta. Both of them very, very verbally, emotionally abusive, possibly speculating physical, maybe some sexual abuse in there. That was never,
Well, it was really hard to even really get a testimony from Ed
Mhm.
Gein about Augusta because the second you brought her into the conversation, he would start to literally fall apart in front of you. And even some police officers stated that he would babble like a little baby anytime you brought up Augusta. And there are parts in the book for Psycho and even some aspects of it in the movie where you kind of get a sense of that.
More in the book than the movie, for sure.
Yes. I will say real quick, the one thing that I really enjoyed about the movie is you have to pay attention to the actor who is playing Norman because he's doing a lot of his acting on his face. He'll go from smiling 1 second to frown the next. If you know what you're looking for, that's kind of spooky. You can change at the tip of a dime like that, and he, at some parts in the book and in the movie, he becomes his mother.
Which is why they considered Norman to be split personalities, or back then, multiple personalities, which is now called DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. If you know anything about that, if you've seen the movie Split,
Oh, James
such a
McAvoy.
good movie. He does such a great job of kind of outlining what. Obviously, it's a very like over the top idea of what DID is. It really shows the differences in the personalities. That's what I really liked about it.
Yeah, like, and not just differences in personalities, but remembering the movie Split,
Mm-hmm.
one of his alters, as they called them,
Mm-hmm.
had to take insulin.
Yeah.
Like, how crazy is that?
One
Like,
of them, I mean, they all had different dialects, and one of them had glasses and the other ones didn't. Like,
the other one was an
yeah.
8-year-old boy. Then on this is a man in his late 30s.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of getting into that, you go into Psycho knowing that Norman Bates, well, if you, I mean, even the overview of Psycho, it tells you that Norman Bates has multiple personalities. For those of you that don't understand DID or what DID is, essentially DID includes two or more personalities, which in their cases would be himself, Norman, and his mother, right? This must involve a discontinued sense of self, which can include alterations in affect, behavior, consciousness, memory, even sensory motor function, like we talked about. Um, he, in the movie and in the book, talks to himself. Like you hear, and this is what's really cool, like about audiobooks, and I know they didn't have these back then, but is the way that you can, that the person reading the book can give you the different people. Because, like, if you're reading a book yourself, you don't always picture, I mean, you can, but you don't always picture different voices, right? You're just kind of reading it.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
like, the audiobook, the guy who read it does a really good job of portraying, like, you know when Norman's talking. You know when Norman's mom's talking. You know when Mary's talking, or the sheriff, or the PI, or whoever's talking, you know who it is because of the way that they talk in the book. Um, but there are parts where he's having full conversations talking to his mother. And so if you didn't know going into this that he was two people or he was had two personalities, you'd be like, "Wow, this man's having a conversation and his mother sounds like a not a nice person, you know?" People with DID also experience gaps in time. Gaps in time don't necessarily have to be like I missed 4 hours of my day yesterday. Where was I? Right? It can also be gaps in important personal information. They may not remember their birthday. They may not remember what school they went to. They may not remember personal aspects of their family. They won't remember traumatic events, which DID stems from trauma. That's the biggest part of DID is that it stems from trauma, which would explain why Norman had it in the first place. Because part of the story is that Norman's mother died, which, I mean, we find out later that he killed her and her boyfriend or husband or whatever he was. That was traumatic for Norman, but she was also verbally abusive to him. And so essentially, when someone has DID, it's to protect them from a trauma.
yeah, yeah. And I'd like to kind of go into a little bit about the trauma and the history from Augusta and Norma at the same time to kind of give you an idea of maybe where the groundwork started for this person to have been made. And because that's what I think is happening here. I think Ed Gein, who we know Ed Gein is today, he was created. He wasn't born that way. His mother was hyper religious and frowned upon anything to do with basically the human body and more or less the male human body. And Ed Gein couldn't even touch himself. He couldn't look at himself. His mother would look down on him for that every day of his life. She told him that she wishes he was a girl and only a mother could love you.
Well, and there's even, according to Ed, there was a part of his life where he was exploring his body, if you want to call it that, and his mother grabbed him while he was exploring his body and told him that it was inappropriate and he was going to go to hell and he should never do that. He should never touch himself. He should never do those things. He should never be with a woman because women are evil and he's evil and he'll never be anybody but her son.
Yeah, and Ed Gein, along with what appears to be Norman at the same time, they dealt with this type of abuse since birth, all the way up until the mother's passing. That was kind of something that I really enjoyed about the book because of how many similarities there are with Ed Gein. I liked the fact that Norman was the one who took his mother out. And it also kind of correlates with Ed Gein as well, because I also, from my own research, think that Ed Gein felt a little bit, if not fully responsible for Augusta's death.
Oh, he 100% did because I believe she had a stroke or a heart attack at one point because of something that he was doing that stressed her out. Oh,
it was Henry.
Yes, right. And so ever since then, her health wasn't great, and so he blamed himself. And
just to clarify, that Ed's older brother died in a brush fire that very much seemed like it was deliberate, and Augusta adored Henry. And so losing Henry, especially in that way, I think that's what, I think she died when he did. And that threw her body into so much stress. I think it was a few weeks later after his passing. And there's also speculation that Ed is the perpetrator of killing his own brother. There is no evidence. But, I mean, it's hard to not put it past him, especially knowing what we know.
Yeah. So, with Norman and Ed in mind, more Norman, whenever his mother died, it even says in the book, like, he almost essentially, like, took on the personality of his mother, right? So he was himself, but he was also his mother. And he would talk for her. He would dress like her. He would commit these crimes against these people, saying, and even dressing like his mother, and it would be, oh, mother did it. Mother says that, I can't do this, or she won't let me do this, or I'm sick, or she's sick. And whenever Mary comes in and tries to essentially, like, because Mary meets Norman at the motel, she's trying to get away from the crime she committed to create a new life for herself, because $40,000 in 1960 was like almost $500,000 now. So that's a lot of money.
And just to clarify, ladies and gentlemen, there was no plastic back then.
No.
That was 40 grand in cash.
She was carrying 40 G's in her purse in an envelope. She bought a car, paid for everything in cash. She tried to change her name. She put a different name down on the motel roster so that she couldn't be tracked.
I will give the author credit to how he wrote Mary's kind of story, because she definitely, it seemed like it was spur of the moment. She
was a bad girl.
She was smart, because she didn't just buy one car. She went to another car lot a ways down and bought another one. And that's the one that shows up with the busted fender.
So there's a scene where she's discussing, or like he is giving her dinner essentially, and because mom won't let him come up to the house with her. So he says, mother's ill, and but I brought dinner, and they're talking, and well, if your mother makes you do all these things or doesn't allow you to leave, like then, and if she's that sick, then why is she not in an institution? And then just blows up. She's not crazy. She doesn't need to be in an institution. Blah blah blah. Shut up. And then it's like his whole demeanor changed, and then just goes back to this calm person, and he ends up killing her later. Well, mother ends up killing her later.
And if we're being completely honest, nothing to Alfred Hitchcock, because that is the person who directed Psycho in 1960. I think she's still alive.
Yeah.
That knife didn't touch her.
No, it might have touched the shower curtain.
But we're talking about the 1960s, and
I
stuff
know.
like this didn't exist, and so it.
No, people were leaving the theater vomiting and just so stressed out, and I'm like, I don't even see blood. What's happening?
It's what I would like to call the Exorcist effect, because when the Exorcist came out, it blew up.
See, I feel like that about the Blair Witch Project. Everyone talked about how scary the Blair Witch Project was, and oh my gosh, it's the scariest thing I've ever seen. And my maiden name is Blair, and so I always got made fun of, like, oh, you're the Blair Witch. And so I finally watched it when I was old enough. Yes, I was a sheltered child. And I was just like, this is it. This is what I couldn't watch. And it was nothing. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so the movie does not even do the book any justice whatsoever. He kind of switches back and forth. He switches between himself and then his mother and then himself and then his mother. It's almost like whenever the movie does a really good job of showing the distress that Norman has when he finds out that his mother killed Mary. Like, oh my God, I can't believe she did that. Oh my God, I'm so distressed. And like you could see it on his face. And then he even goes as far as like burying the body in the lake or the whatever it is inside of the car. And at the very end, it shows you that he's dressed up as his mother and he did it and has his mother's corpse in the bottom of the in the wine cellar. Another thing about DID, the biggest word in DID is dissociative, right? So dissociative amnesia comes with DID. So, babe, remind me, how many bodies did they find in Ed Gein's house? Like fully 100%, we know how many bodies were found in his house that he dug up.
It is speculation, but it seemed like he was successful about 9 times. And the crazy part about that is he went out to that graveyard, shovel in hand, over 60 times. And he would be sometimes in the middle of digging up a grave, come to, realize what he was doing. He'd put the dirt back. Sometimes he would even have the body out, and he would put that back and go home. And that doesn't sound like schizophrenia to me. And that's what he was diagnosed with when he went into the hospital after all this thing came to light.
So in case anybody is curious, so again, I'm a licensed therapist. I diagnose for a living. I treat people with mental disorders. Criteria for schizophrenia includes 2 or more of the following. So for at least a month: delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior, and negative symptoms. So negative symptoms are like someone with what we call a flat affect, just shows no emotion, they just don't want to do anything. They have no motivation. They're just kind of like, they don't show any, facial expressions for anything. So it's characterized by 2 of those, but also has to have severe cognitive impairment. So let's go into Ed for a second. Ed, was he having hallucinations? Potentially. And you pointed out something in the show, the Monsters show with Ed Gein, that I thought was really cool. It was an entire episode where he's with Bernice Worden that nobody, the normal viewer, isn't going to know, but because it's us, we dug deeper. And what did you find about that episode?
It was crazy too, because when we were sitting there and we were watching it, Ed is having this entire beautiful episode with Bernice Worden. And I'm over here thinking to myself, like, what is going on here? Ed never had a conversation like this with Bernice Worden.
We were legit mad about it.
And his other victim, Mary Holgan, they were friends. They knew each other. Ed would spend a lot of time at that bar, especially after Augusta died. So I'm like, what is going on? And then I remember even saying to you, like, hey, was that T Green?
Yeah.
And then her dress was green, her blood was green, because that entire episode is a visual and auditory hallucination that Ed Gein is going through. Granted, that is vastly glorified in the show,
Oh, for sure.
but we really also don't know that much about exactly what was going through his head when these things were going on. Because even when he went into therapy, there's a very good chance that if he could remember, he wouldn't want to, or he simply could not remember, or he wasn't mentally present.
They talk about the idea that Ed Gein is schizophrenic because of these hallucinations and things like that. One of the things that doesn't make sense to me that is not a part of schizophrenia is why would Ed Gein start digging up a body or all these bodies and then just come to in the middle of it and put them back and just be like, I don't know what actually, like, I don't know what happened. People with schizophrenia don't do that. They don't have these dissociative fugues.
It also could be bullshit.
Correct.
It also could be Ed trying to deflect from how much he was actually doing. I myself don't believe he was that cunning.
No.
I do know that he had an above average reading level. His IQ was average. He was not a dumb person. He was just very, very sick.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Norman Bates is in Psycho. If you want a little bit more of a kind of modern version of that, if you haven't seen American Psycho,
No,
that
he's schizophrenic.
it
sure.
is a completely different story. But Patrick Bateman, who is played by Christian Bale, there is audio, like he's almost narrating some of his own story, and just even in those words that he says is bone chilling.
Yeah.
And not to mention it's a fantastic movie. American Psycho is loosely based off of Psycho, and Psycho is supposed to be loosely based off of Ed Gein.
Yeah, doubt it.
And I do know that Norman Bates didn't wear skin around the house. And as far as we know from the book, Norman Bates has only dug up one grave.
However, they do talk about in both the book and the movie that Norman has an obsession with taxidermy, which, I mean, is similar to Ed Gein because his taxidermy was people and making furniture out of people. One of the things that people don't understand is, yes, Ed Gein could have had hallucinations, delusions, paranoia. People with DID can also. It just looks different. Whereas schizophrenia, the psychotic symptoms are due to, a change in your brain. Like your brain just has holes in it almost, or more gray matter than a regular brain.
Can we go ahead and go into the brain scan?
Yes,
because you're right on the cusp of that.
I
And let's just go
know.
ahead and get into it.
Yes. People with DID can have psychotic symptoms, but it's as a result of internal fragmentation and dissociation. Again, dissociation coming from trauma. So, this is probably the coolest thing I've learned in my career so far. And if you take two people, okay, obviously two people have two different brains. Everyone has a different brain. You put them both in a machine, a CT scan or an MRI, and you have them both lay there and their brains are being scanned. One of these people has experienced a traumatic event. The other one has not. If you trigger the traumatic event by mentioning the trauma, let's say that someone was in a really bad car accident, okay, and that was their trauma, like someone could have died or maybe they almost died, just really traumatic. And then you mention a car accident. That person's brain is going to light up differently than the person who did not have a traumatic event. Like the literal brains of two people, one with trauma and one without trauma, look different.
How so?
They light up differently on a brain scan.
So you're saying like one is going to be lighter and one's going to be darker than the other?
Or one is going to show more activity and one's going to go darker.
That's definitely a better way of explaining it than I just did.
Which would make sense with people with DID because the biggest part of that is dissociation and it's due to trauma, why they would experience psychotic symptoms. Especially because the DSM also says that it's really stress related. So if someone's under a lot of stress or someone is triggered by something, that's other personality comes out, right? Just like in Split, the different personalities would come out whenever they were triggered by something. It coincides with trauma, which I thought was really interesting, which we know that Norman and Ed both had traumatic childhoods.
And if you want to kind of get an idea of what those brain scans kind of look like, we will be putting up some good ones that we can find on our Instagram. So once we get that set up, you guys can go check that out and see exactly what we're talking about because it is mind-blowing.
Other stressful situations that Norman and Ed both faced were the internal conflicts of trying to figure out who they were, their self-image, and then the image that their mothers had, where Ed Gein, people thought that toward the end of the show or the series, people thought that Ed was trans. That's why he was making a woman suit, right? Even he thought he might have been trans once he figured out what it was. There's a part in the book I wish they put this in the movie. I really wish they did, but they didn't. Norman is looking at himself in the mirror, naked, and he's talking about what he looks like, and then he says, but Mother doesn't like when I look in the mirror because she says that it's dirty and you're not supposed to do that. And he's like, and of course it is, and starts describing his body. And then he says, but I look in the mirror because it just doesn't look like me. It's not my body. Part of DID, which I also found super interesting, was that individuals may report their bodies feel different, such as they could be a different person, a different gender, a different age, all of the above, which Norman does say he feels different in his own body. And then Ed also felt different in the body he was in, and that's why he could have potentially thought he was trans. Was he trans? Or did he just feel different in his own body because he didn't have schizophrenia and he had DID?
Somebody who thinks or feels or knows that they're trans, they are not going to go wear somebody else's skin to achieve that feeling.
No.
And it wasn't just wearing somebody's skin. He had a shelf of his prized heads.
Yeah.
Bernice Warden was on that shelf.
He also had a chest of other womanly body parts.
It was called the mammary vest, is what the police were calling it.
But no, I'm talking about like a chest, like a box, if you will, of
vulvas.
Yes.
Yes, disgusting, but...
And then he would wear them because he thought he wanted to be a woman, and then he would look in the mirror, just like Norman, with, oh, this isn't my body, right?
Well, and it went so far with Ed Gein like that, speaking of the vulvas. If you ran into
interesting sentence, speaking of the vulvas.
Oh,
nobody.
You heard it here, folks. Was if you ran into Ed Gein on the street and he was in normal clothes, he was wearing one on his genitalia.
Interesting. There
was a good chance he was wearing one.
I didn't know that
at the time. Yes. I'm not entirely sure if it was all the time. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him.
Got a real Buffalo Bill situation going on over there.
Silence of the Lambs.
All of this to say that if Norman Bates and Psycho are based on the story of Ed Gein so similarly, why was Ed diagnosed with schizophrenia and not DID?
And see, I think that's a good question because it's hard to kind of tell. Was at the time, but then we've discussed that, and they had medications for stuff like this at the time, and
they knew what multiple personalities was.
And it's like when you go through watching the show, and the last podcast on the left does an incredible series on Ed Gein.
I mean, they do an incredible series on everybody, so.
But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty with Ed Gein, you really need to go check out Harold Schechter's book, Deviant. He paints a picture of this man as truthful as he possibly can to a T. Even reading Deviant, I don't get schizophrenia.
Because he's not schizophrenic. Knowing what I know, and you and I know a lot. I mean, we don't judge. We fall asleep to true crime podcasts. Like, that's comforting to us. We know everything there is to know about serial killers. That's why we started this podcast, because we talk about movies, we talk about serial killers, we talk about crime, and then we're like, oh, you're like, what would this person have if they walked into your office right now? And I'm like, oh, they'd have this diagnosis. Like, this was just fun for us, and that's why we're like, hey, we should talk about this like we do every day anyway, but put it in a podcast. Like, we know everything there is to know about serial killers. Not everything, I'm sure, but a lot that there is to know, because it's just an interest of ours.
Unfortunately, for my aspect, I probably know
Yeah,
a lot
Probably.
more than I'm willing to admit. Also, being the only person in this conversation who has actually held a human brain in their hands.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I go through everything that I possibly can. I don't shield myself from anything. And when it comes to the discussions we have here, I don't plan on shielding you guys from anything either,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to true crime. But we're not a true crime centric podcast. We are
Mhm.
going to talk about even fictional characters, just like Norman Bates. Even though we are
Mhm.
discussing Ed Gein, it's because he's based off of him.
Mhm.
Ed Gein, just like Psycho, was the beginning of all of this. We, or myself, and I know you, I would love to figure it out and get to the bottom of it.
I know there's probably going to be questions as well. Okay, well, how do you explain, people like he was dangerous, like he was violent, like, okay, people with schizophrenia don't go around killing people. But even so, the National Institute of Health, they has studies essentially that have been done on the differences with DID and violence and schizophrenia and violence. And some studies suggest that higher rates of violent behavior in clinical samples compared to the general population, with one study reporting 38 to 55% of patients with DID have a history of violent behavior, compared to only about between 10.7 and 13.2% of patients with schizophrenia having violent behavior. But you're going to tell me Ed Gein was schizophrenic? No.
For the most part, Ed Gein wasn't inherently violent anyways.
No, he wasn't. People even said he was a great babysitter.
Yeah, he babysitted people's kids. I mean, everyone called him around town. He was quite an oddball, but it's old Eddie Gein.
He was the neighborhood babysitter. I work on the daily basis with people with psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder. Very rarely do you encounter one that's actually violent. But people with DID, not that they're all violent, but they are more unpredictable than someone with schizophrenia, because you just don't know when that personality is going to pop out.
Yeah, and essentially, you don't know who you're talking to.
Yeah, and schizophrenia, a lot of times, I mean, when someone's in a full-blown hallucination or delusion, I mean, chances are they've been in that before, and you know what that looks like.
Man, that is spooky to think about, that your brain, that's supposed to be you and everything that there is about you, can flip and turn on you so fast like that, and then you get lost and it's out of control. But that's the issue we come with time and time again with mental health at all in this country right now. Any chance that we can to bring awareness to it, which I hope this podcast kind of does, because we're talking about mental health. That's what this podcast is. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I know that you are passionate about it. You went to school for it. This is what you're licensed with. This is what you do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge puzzle. And we have all the pieces. We just don't know where they fit yet.
I mean, I don't read, but I would read the DSM for funsies. So this stuff's interesting for me.
Well, I mean, after I got diagnosed with my nice laundry list of stuff too, I went and did some research on my own diagnoses inside of the DSM as well. It's so interesting.
It's ever changing.
And it has to be,
Mm-hmm.
because society is ever changing, not to mention the amount of chemicals we're putting into our bodies that are getting our chemical balances in our bodies mixed up, and all of like, even talking to you with all this going on.
Mm-hmm.
What's that doing? What do I say to that? I say, let's talk about it. Is there anything else you think we want to add, or?
Obviously, Although I'm a licensed therapist, I am not, Ed Gein is not sitting in front of me. I cannot do a full clinical assessment on Ed Gein, so don't come after me. It's what I do, and it's fun, and I'm allowed to disagree. That is the one thing about my profession is a doctor, a psychiatrist can diagnose somebody, and I could think it's wrong, and we can argue about it, and it's fine. I'm not diagnosing Ed Gein with anything. I just want to put that out there. I don't want anybody to come at me and be like, well, you can't diagnose him because he's not in front of you. You're correct. So any of our future podcasts we do, this is for fun. This is to talk about it. This is to get the conversation going about mental health and what that looks like on different people.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about it, and I've been wanting to do this. Like, I've been into true crime up to my eyeballs in every which way in between, the paranormal, the macabre, the occult, everything since about 2013 is when my older brother James actually introduced me to the last podcast on the left, and I have been religiously listening to them ever since. And I actually have a yearly rotation with all of their serial killer episodes, so I've been listening to the same episodes on these people for the good part of a decade straight. And some of my sources today were the last book on the left, obviously, by the last podcast on the left boys. It was by Marcus Parks, Ben Kissel, and Henry Zabrowski. The book Psycho by Robert Bloch, and the movie Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock.
Obviously, for mine, the DSM is a big one by the American Psychiatric Association and the National Institute of Health. That being said, I hope, this was a fun conversation, and I hope to have more. We have an Instagram, Split Screen ICT, if you want to give us a follow. That would also be a good place to, give us ideas on movies you want us to watch. I think our next one is going to be really good. We talked about it. Sometimes even comedies, if you want us to just be like, hey, you should take a look at this, you should watch this. And, we have Instagram and then splitscreenict@gmail.com if you want to give us an email or.
Yeah. Always let us know how we're doing, and we can only get better from here. And this is episode 1. So if you're still here and you're enjoying it, we obviously kind of had an idea of what we were doing when we started, and all we can do now is get smarter, get better, and I'm just excited.
I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be here with you. This is fun.
This is fun. This is extremely fun. So hopefully everybody enjoyed it, and I hope everybody has a great week, month, or wherever you are at in the world. I hope everything is as good as it can be.
And until next time, thank you for listening.